don't know. She
Oh. So we do that.
Melissa's online.
We have 7. For distance.
I'm not sure anymore. They're terrible. I can see better with them off.
Yeah, because mine is doing that same thing.
You'll let us know when we're live?
Yep, we are, we're live with the participants who are blogging in there.
Okay.
We're live. And George and Melissa are there as well.
Great. All right, we good? All right, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the annual meeting of the Municipal Review Committee. My name is Karen Fussell. I'm the president of the board of directors. And thank you all very much for joining in today. We are going to start with some introductions. We will go over the results of the annual election. We're going to recognize one of our departing board members. The treasurer will provide her annual report. I'm going to make some remarks and then we're going to open it up for questions and comments from the audience. So with that, we'll get started. And I'll let folks know we're using the OWL technology today. So when you speak, especially because we have masks on, you want to make sure you're speaking slowly and loudly and projecting towards the object, the obelisk. So your task will be, for the board members at least, to start, will be to do that. We're going to go through, you can provide your name, your community you're with, your title, your role with MRC, and perhaps how many years you've been serving on the board. I'll start with myself. As I said, I'm Karen Fussell. I'm the finance director with the city of Brewer. I'm the president of the board. I serve on the finance committee and the communications committee, and I have been on the board for 9 years. Tony, how about going your
My
direction?
name is Tony Smith, vice president of the board. I've been on this board for 6 years. I'm on the finance committee, the MRC.
My digital Langer in town of China. This is my last meeting with all of you folks. And I've been on the board,
Just speak up, Irene, really.
I've been on the board. But I know I've been at least 22 years as a 4 years on this board. Okay. 4 years on this board, but 22 years on the select board in China. And I still have been in China doing a couple things now. Like making sure we have the breakfast once a week for the elders. Now that I'm an elder. But I've enjoyed all of it, and I just saddened to know that I'm not going to see you very often, but I want to let you know that I've enjoyed the company in the years that I have been involved with, and I've seen you.
Thanks, Irene. Bob?
Hi, I'm Bob Butler. I live in Waldoboro. Still can't hear me? I can speak louder than that. I'm half deaf as it is. I live in Waldoboro, where I serve on the select board, and I've into my first term of 3 years on the MRC board. And I have some remarks later on in the meeting to say that it's a real pleasure to serve on this board and to participate in the important work that it does.
Thanks, Bob. Kevin?
My name is Kevin Howell. I'm the town manager in Carmel, Maine. I also reside in Carmel. I've been there for as town manager for 7 years. I'm on the board here in my second term, and I serve on the Waste Flow Committee, which is, you missed that part here also.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Kev.
Yep.
I'm Aaron Hootery with the city of Bangor. Been on this board for 4.5 months at this point, 4.5 months. I hope to continue to be on this board. I'm the Public Works Director for the city of Bangor and manage waste for the city of Bangor. And I've been with Bangor for about 13 months. So new all the way around, very happy to be here.
Michael Carroll, I'm the Executive Director for the MRC. I live in Orono, and I've been with the MRC about 2.5 years now.
I'm Sophie Wilson. I'm from Orono Town Manager. I've been with the MRC. I was trying to figure this out. I think I'm finishing up my 15th or 16th year. And I have been given the awesome responsibility of acting as the MRC's treasurer.
You did a fabulous job with that, Sophie. Really appreciate you doing
You
that.
just say that, so you don't have to.
Exactly. And Dana was not able to be with us today, but Melissa is participating remotely. Melissa, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, everybody. My name is Melissa Doan. I am the town manager of the town of Bradley. I've been here since 2005, and I'm newly elected to the board for 2021.
Thanks, Melissa. So with that, we will move on to Mike, who's going to present the results of the annual election.
Yes, yes. Turn up that slide, Jesse, please. Each year, 3 seats become available to serve on the MRC Board of Directors for a 3-year term. Joining members are sent a ballot with approved nominations listed to also include their bios. Each joining member is entitled to 1 vote for every 100 tons of MSW they have processed in the previous calendar year. This year, we had 4 candidates running for the 3 available seats. The results for the 2022 to 2024 terms are as follows. Aaron Hootery, City of Bangor Public Works Director and current MRC board member, received 32% of the vote. Karen, Finance Director, City of Brewer, and current MRC Board President, received 27% of the vote. And the final seat is awarded to Steve Lewis, Booth Bay Region Refuse Manager and Town of Booth Bay Selectman, received 25% of the member vote. I want to thank Jim Billette for taking the time to participate in the election. Jim fell just short with 16% of the vote. Congratulations to all 3 candidates that were elected. I look forward to working with you during your term. I believe we also have Steve in the virtual audience right now. So Jesse, if you could bring him over, the board can address Steve.
Steve, you're promoted to a panelist, so you could turn on your video and unmute yourself.
There it goes.
There
There he is.
Hi,
Is that
Steve. Congratulations.
Well, thank you. I look forward to it.
Welcome. We'll look forward to working with you starting in January. We really appreciate you taking the time and effort to submit your application and nomination, and congratulations on the win. And I actually appreciate everybody stepping up, Aaron and Mr. Billette as well. And we look forward to additional participation from anybody that might be out there in the audience in future elections.
Thank you.
Thank you, Steve.
This is probably the least fewest words you'll ever hear me say.
Is that a warning?
Thank you. So that wraps up the election, Karen.
Okay.
Move on to the next slide. We want to take the time to recognize MRC board member Irene Belanger. Irene has served on the MRC board since 2018. She is also just recently retired from China Select Board after 42 years of serving the town, with 22 of those years on the China Select Board as a China Select Board member. Irene, you will be missed, and on behalf of myself and the MRC board, I'd like to present you with the following. thank you for everything you did. Here's some flowers and a little plaque that thanks you for your service and the time that you spent on the board. You're welcome.
Thank you, Irene. Really, it's been a pleasure to have you serving with us, and we wish you well in all of your endeavors going forward. I know you're going to stay active, supporting your community. We'll miss you here, and just know that you've done good work to lay the foundation for the future that we're going to have working together for the region.
Very, very much.
Thank you, Irene. It's been a pleasure working.
Stay right there. Yeah, absolutely. Your term doesn't end until the end of December.
You're on the hook till the 31st. Thank you, Irene. And with Karen, this is probably one of my shortest presentations. That's all I have.
Over and out, huh?
So, yeah.
Thank you, Mike. And I think next up we have our report from our esteemed treasurer, who's going over the numbers once again, just to make sure.
Yeah, I'm trying to pull them up because I can't see.
I can-
So, we're gonna have a pretty quick and painless treasurer's report this year. I wanna just go through 3 things in the report. First, we're gonna talk about the cash balances that we have on account. Then, as required by the bylaws, we've got a draft budget, and I'd like to review the adoption process of that budget. And then finally, I just want to talk for a minute about the projected tip fee and rebates for the coming year. So we currently have about $5.5 million on account. The lion's share of that is invested, our invested funds. We then are carrying the $1.5 million in the cash collateral account, another $145,000 in the operating account, and a little over $30,000 in distribution and development. That $30,000 will swing wildly through the months, because that's where we bring member money in for the tip fee and then pay the bills associated with the tip fee. So before you can talk about how we think we're going to spend money, we have to talk about how we think we're going to bring money into the operating budget to spend. Before I get into detail, I would really want to say that Mike, number one, did an amazing job putting a draft budget together. It took us very little time to finalize it because he had done so much work. However, I don't think it is unreasonable for people to understand that we're in a bit of a period of flux, and over the course of the next month before when we adopt the budget, things might change. So I would expect that this budget will go to the finance committee probably in mid-January when we have a better sense, and perhaps will change. However, as of today, based on operations today, this is what we are projecting. So we are not projecting a change in the annual dues. We're going to stay right where we were in terms of the fee for annual dues. We expect that will bring in a little bit more money simply because last year we brought in more tonnage, and it's based on the tonnage that people brought in the previous year. So that is a known. Revenue from the Hamden facility that would have been site lease, we know that there will be a period that we're not going to get any revenue from that, and we're also working at what that might look like. So I think Mike has done a good job of kind of creating a conservative estimate on the revenue that might come out of the facility should the current plan come to fruition. Once again, we are suggesting that we'll pull almost $205,000 of the interest earnings on our reserves, and another transfer of about $180,000 to secure the plant moving forward. So the total budget is up about $133,000 from last year. We're expecting about $637,000 of revenue. Expenses, if we have $637,000 of revenue, we are expecting about $637,000 of expenses. Administration includes all of our personnel expenses, our office, the day-to-day operational, the training, the memberships, the meat of operations. The financial services, the audit, which we're required to do, I think we put insurance in there as well. Technical consulting is all of our consultants minus legal, because Jonathan gets his own line, just saying. And then miscellaneous, we usually put a flat amount in the $10,000 range aside for the board's discretion to use as the year goes on. And contingency, it is an odd number. That is me rounding to make it work with revenue. But it is a number, a budget that would be available to the board to use for something that is unforeseen. And then the $180,000 that we said we might bring out of invested funds to secure the plant, there is the $180,000 offset for the expense. So if we don't need that money, we would not bring it out of our invested funds. So the plan, not yet.
Sorry.
Not yet. So the plan is the same as it is every other year, which is we show everybody the budget or a draft idea of what the budget's going to be. It is out there for the public to see and for our members to comment on. And when we come back to the January 26, 2022 board meeting, this would be on the agenda for consideration and adoption. So that's what I've got there. Before, no, don't go touching anything yet, Jess. So the next thing I want to talk about, and I don't usually, but I do think it's important for members to know that the escalation rate on the tip fee, which is a product of the Consumer Price Index, is 6.81% this year, which means that the tip fee in 2022 will be $77.20 per ton. The other thing that's important for our members to remember is that when we started this adventure, we agreed that we would pay rebates of $5 a ton to new joining member, former charter members, $3 a ton to former new charter members for 3 years after commercial operation. That is coming to an end on October 31st, 2022. So people should most definitely be planning accordingly when they're putting their budgets together. Not saying that the board won't make other decisions, but that initial obligation is scheduled to sunset October 31st, 2022. And that's the sunny treasurer's report.
Good information, Sophie. Thank you very much. And thank you, Mike, for putting together that budget and working so hard and doing such a great job keeping straight all of the accounts and invoices and administration on that side of it, and really do an amazing job.
Thank you.
There's just a question that makes sense to answer right now. It's John Banks asked, is MRC's fiscal year same as the calendar year?
Yes, it is, John.
All right. Super. Well, I've prepared a few remarks here to sort of sum up the year, a little year in review. Thank you very much, both Sophie and Mike, for your participation today in the meeting. And good afternoon again to everyone, both those here in the room and those that are participating online. I'm pleased to be here today, though I have to admit this is not the annual meeting that we as a board had hoped for or expected. We really hope to be introducing you to new buyers at the plant in Hampden and talking about the future under their leadership. But perhaps it's fitting for this process, which has been so painfully and really, truly excruciatingly drawn out so far. We're really not quite there yet, though believe me, it's not for the lack of trying. I'll talk in a bit about the status of the plant sale, but I thought it would be useful to start by taking stock of where we've come from, what we've accomplished, and the important role that I feel MRC plays in ensuring the communities in this region have a viable, long-term, environmentally desirable and sustainable waste management solution. Many may not know this, but MRC turned 30 years old this year. I think that accomplishment alone deserves recognition. Some of you listening might remember MRC's origin story. I know some of you actually were there. How when PERC first opened in 1988, it did not perform as expected, and how by 1989, the owners declared the need for higher tip fees to remain solvent. Out of that facility startup crisis, MRC was born. Communities, our communities, which all had individual contracts with PERC, realized we could be much more effective working together. And so began a very successful and financially rewarding partnership. Other storms hit the PERC operations over the years, and MRC helped communities weather them, navigating members through obstacles and challenges, not to mention multiple changes in PERC ownership, all while strengthening members' positions and maintaining tip fee stability. As the 2018 expiration date of members' contracts approached, MRC looked to the future. Our goal was to move this region to the next generation of waste management, one that would substantially increase recycling and diversion from landfills, and one that would rely on less waste and be more appropriately sized to our needs. PERC's partners, however, had a different vision of the future, which is what led MRC to the process that resulted in the construction of the facility in Hampden. An advanced waste processing plant that removes saleable recyclables from MSW at the front end, converts organics into energy products, and creates pulp and other commodities out of fiber waste and residuals. It was, and it is, a beautiful thing, a future to be excited about. Of course, we're all too familiar with the Hampden facility's own startup crisis. However, it's important to remember that roadblock and that failure was due to Coastal's poor management and the lack of financing, not because the facility didn't work. From its startup phases and months of full commercial operations, we know that the plant and its technology work, and we know what improvements are needed to enhance efficiency and increase diversion rates. That's why we're doing everything in our power to reopen the Hampden facility. Unfortunately, MRC's interests and efforts to that end have been significantly stymied by the complex legal ownership structure and inaction on the part of the bondholders who hold primary position in the receivership and sale process. While some have painted MRC as showing the same lack of action this past year plus, since the plant's been closed, I can tell you nothing has been further from the truth. In fact, MRC, and in particular, our executive director, Mike Carroll, have been working harder than ever. Within weeks of the plant closing, MRC was able to work behind the scenes with Waste Management and PERC to keep 3/4 of members' waste out of landfill. MRC ensured that the plant was secure and in compliance with DEP's permits. And although legally the bondholders were in the driver's seat, it was the MRC who reached out to potential investors and buyers for the plant, and that first moved those first proposals forward. In December 2020, out of the 3 proposals submitted, The bondholders chose Delta Thermal Energy, despite DTE being last on MRC's list. Nevertheless, MRC spent countless hours undertaking good faith effort to make the proposal work while protecting members' interests. However, as you all know, after months of missed deadlines and broken promises, MRC finally said enough and revoked DTE's exclusivity. And although the bondholders may still be holding out a hope for a deal with DTE, I can tell you the MRC has moved on. This fall, MRC solicited another round of proposals and received 2 complete submissions. And MRC has now had 3 in-depth meetings with one of the prospects and reviewed and commented on draft terms. Company's given the bondholders trustee their final and best offer, but we've been disappointed to say that we're still waiting to hear back from the bondholders trustee with their response. As you may have seen, MRC has another special board meeting this Friday to discuss our next steps. I share all this history to help our members and the public understand the amount of time, effort, and passion that the MRC has put into finding a solution, a long-term solution that moves the region forward in terms of recycling rates and landfill diversion. We've heard a bit of frustration out there about how perhaps we're not doing enough to reopen the facility, or that we're not transparent and are holding too many executive sessions. To that, I say that the MRC and its volunteer board has never worked harder for its members and the future of waste disposal in this region than we have over the last 2 years. MRC follows Maine's public meeting laws, so you know about all of the meetings that we hold. And yes, we have held a lot of executive sessions this past year, but all have been warranted given the complex legal and financial issues we've been grappling with. Take heart, if this were in a private sector, these would all have taken place in a back room and you'd never even know about them. But just like our members do with their select boards and councils, MRC needs to be able to have private conversations with its legal counsels, advisors, and prospective buyers regarding contract negotiation issues. Even if it didn't send every potential investor or buyer running for the hills, broadcasting and play-by-play would make any deal less competitive, not to mention open the MRC up to legal issues. With regard to reopening the Hampton facility, some have hinted, and some not too subtly, that perhaps it's time to walk away from the plant, that it's just too problematic. But to those critics, I ask, and I ask this sincerely, what is the alternative? Reinstating recycling programs at a going rate of about $140 a ton may be an option for wealthier communities, but what about others? And with the remainder of the MSW going where? To landfill? To PERC, which, while still operating, is having its own issues and is regular having to bypass to Juniper Ridge? To Eco Maine, which is close to capacity, not to mention over 100 miles distant from the bulk of MRC waste? Trust me, if there were an easier or better long-term solution for this region's waste problem, we would not be fighting for this plant. The simple truth is that there are few alternatives for solid waste processing in this region, which is why MRC is working so hard to create a new option that will benefit the region as a whole. MRC stands behind the plant because we know the technology works. This transition has been more challenging than we ever could have imagined. However, I tell you, our goals have not changed. MRC seeks to provide its members with the most cost-effective, environmentally responsible approach to MSW possible for the long term. An organization like ours stands out in today's world. As politics and chatter drive more local, state, national, and even global reports of us versus them, of walls going up, here we have an organization made up of a diverse set of members. We've got rural and urban, small towns, Maine's third largest city, northern forests, counties, coastal communities, who are coming together under one goal: We're seeking a long-term processing solution for our municipal solid waste and recycling that is cost-effective for all our members. We believe that we will achieve greater diversion rates from landfills and more recycling by sticking together and negotiating with one voice through the MRC. We know the Hampton plant works and what it needs to run more efficiently. As painful as this transition period is, we believe the plant remains this region's best hope to maximize recovery and reduce our reliance on landfills for the long term. We can do that together. We will do that together. Despite the challenges, we should be proud of our collaboration 30 years and going now. And our members should be proud of the work undertaken by this volunteer board of directors. MRC and its board are you, town managers, select board and council members, public works directors, finance directors, concerned citizens, and public servants. We believe in our collective power and voice and look forward to a future when, with the facility reopened, we can turn our attention to find more ways to collaborate on other hard to dispose items like construction, demolition debris, carpets, mattresses, tires, and more. Before I conclude though, and we open the floor to questions, I want to make sure I acknowledge some folks and their efforts over the last year. First and foremost, MRC's Executive Director, Mike Carroll. Mike, it's safe to say we would not have a plant in sellable and reopenable condition if not for your Herculean efforts since May of 2020. It's not an overstatement to say that Mike has worked around the clock, and I mean days, nights, weekends, holidays, to preserve and secure the plant, ensure compliance with DEP permits, and develop solutions to the many obstacles preventing a plant sale, all while managing the disposal of members' waste. Mike, your problem-solving powers never cease to amaze, and your dedication to our members is second to none. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I also want to acknowledge and thank MRC's key contractors, including technical consultant George Aronson of Commonwealth Resource Management, which I forgot to introduce on the video there. Hello, George. Thank you for coming today. Our legal counsel, John Pottle from Eaton Peabody, who's with us today in the audience. Our communications manager, Jesse Pottle from Haley Ward, who's behind the camera, sort of, and many more who are behind the scenes. I know we pay them all for the work, but they all have spent substantially more time on MRC issues this past year than they would have normally. I'd also like to acknowledge our partners at Waste Management, at PERC, the town of Hamden, and at Maine DEP. We thank you all for your cooperation through this whole process. And I also offer my sincere appreciation and thanks to my fellow board members for your time and commitment and dedication to this process and to our members, really. And last and certainly not least, our biggest thank you goes out to all our MRC members for your trust and your patience. We look forward to providing you more positive and progress-filled reports in 2022 than we were able to provide in 2021. With that, I would like to see if there's anybody in the board that would like to say anything. Bob, I know you mentioned you had something.
I do.
First thing I want to do though is thank you. We thanked everybody but yourself. Of course, you can't do that. But you deserve a vote of thanks for all of the hard work that you have put in over the years to ensure that this board functions smoothly, openly, transparent, and there's a real value to that. So thank you. And thank you, Sophie, because you've been an incredible treasurer. It's not easy what you do. It's a lot of balls in the air, a lot of things to keep track of, and you've done an amazing job. I know you've had much help, but it's still, it's a dedication of time and effort to do what you've done. I thank you for that. And maybe this is a good time to ask myself or remind myself why I volunteered to participate on this board. And while I can't speak for the other board members, I do point out that we serve because we believe in the MRC's mission to recycle its members' solid waste using methods that are affordable, environmentally sustainable, and reliable. It's really that simple and that complicated. MRC's mission is actually challenges us constantly to look at what we're doing and to find ways of doing it better. Our future will be bleak indeed if we cannot reduce the amounts we throw away while reusing most, if not all of it. It's important to keep this in mind as we continue to work towards a solution that will reopen the solid waste processing facility in Hampton. I say will reopen, not might reopen, because in the final analysis, we don't really have any other choice. The magnitude of the problems the MRC addresses on its members' collective behalf is far greater than any one member could handle by itself. When the 115 towns that worked through the MRC found common cause, they wove a web of mutual interdependence. It's mutual reliance that gives MRC the financial and material resources, i.e. solid waste, its member towns both provide and require to fulfill MRC's mission. We're all in this together. We rely on one another. That's our strength. That's why we're going to move forward together to work together to meet the challenge. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. Anybody else? Aaron?
Yeah, I wanted to say something, and I'm certainly not as eloquent as Bob or you, so so bear with me. But being the newest person here, I think it's. I guess I want everybody to know where I stand, and my loyalties lie with the City of Bangor. That's what I'm here to do, is represent them in their best interest. But I was fortunate enough to be able to take a tour of the MRC facility while it was operating and see how inspiring that whole process is and how well that works. And coming into this position after that, and knowing that we have 33,000 residents who are making trash every day. You know, we're producing, it's just a lot of product. And I'm sure that's why I was voted to the board, because we represent so much trash, absolutely. But that's a big concern for the city officials and for residents. I mean, I get calls, I get residents stopping in to see me, I get emails almost on a weekly basis. It's a very big issue. And a lot of people are asking, why don't we go back to curbside recycling? Why don't we start doing that again? And I've been preaching the same thing that I'm going to say now. I just have the bully pulpit, so I'm going to go ahead and say it again. It didn't work. When we were expending a huge amount of time and effort and money to do curbside recycling, we were getting 8 to 9% recycling. That's not acceptable. That isn't even anywhere near the state's goal of 50%. And it was a great effort. I mean, we gave it a try. But we can't just keep doing that and expect it to get better. And the problem, I think, is because the city of Bangor, like municipalities across the US, we have this broad spectrum of residents. And over here, we have the hardcore recyclers who know what to do. They want to recycle. They know how to recycle. They know what has value. They separate, they clean, they do everything they're supposed to do. And then over here, we have this group of people that don't care. They're going to throw everything in a garbage bag and it doesn't matter to them. But we have this huge group in the middle that wants to recycle, that thinks it's a great idea, but doesn't really put in the effort. And we get product that can't be recycled thrown in with good recycling material. We get things that aren't clean, that aren't sorted. And we made a lot of effort to pull that stuff out. And then we still end up with loads being refused and product going to landfills that should have been recycled because we just couldn't get it right. And that's frustrating, to say the least. And I've got to tell this story. We have 3 cardboard dumpsters at the Public Works Department, and the doors are locked. We've got little slots in them for cardboard to be broken down and put in. So we made it as simple as possible to people to understand. And there's big words on it, say cardboard only. And I had a sign made to put on the ground next to the dumpsters, cardboard only, do not throw these other materials. And we caught a gentleman shoving a flat screen TV into it and asked him why. It says cardboard only. And he says, but I want this to be recycled. And if you look in the dictionary, that guy shoving that LCD TV flat screen in there is the definition of wish cycling. It just doesn't work. We have to have something better. You know, the city of Bangor, having gone through all that, understands that there has to be a better way. And we've invested, we jumped in on this venture because we do believe in the concept. And we know there's a lot at stake, and it's not just Bangor State. We're talking about the planet here. You know what I mean? We have to change the way we're doing things. And if we don't come up with something like this, it's not ever going to be solved. The problem will never be solved. So, you know, we're in this for the right reasons. You know, I've talked to some other people that say they can help us recycle. And, you know, one of them was boasting, well, at our best, we were doing 30% consistently. But we did 50%. You know what I mean? We weren't even running in Hamden at full capacity. The things weren't tuned up. All the equipment wasn't even doing what it was supposed to be doing. And we surpassed 50%. We know it can happen. This isn't a money pit. This isn't, I have people telling me this is a boondoggle. We're just pouring, you know, good money after bad. It's not. This isn't the $10,000 toilet seat at the Air Force is buying. This is proven technology that will work, that can work, and we just need to get the right people in there to operate it and operate it well. I can't say it enough that this will take everything that our residents throw into one container and separate it out. The stuff that's saleable, the stuff that isn't saleable that can be made into another product that is saleable. I mean, that's just, it almost feels like a dream, but I saw it in action. I know it works. We all know it works. I'm talking about preaching to the choir here, so getting a little excited about this. But you know, the MRC has taken steps, and I know I'm covering ground that you covered a little bit, Karen. But you know, the permits are in place, and MRC was smart enough to make sure that their co-signatures on those permits. So now there's some continuity. Now those can be up and going. I know they came in right as we were closing down before, as the facility was closing down, but they're in place. They're still valid, and they can still be used to sell this product. And if we're not selling anything, it'll never work. So that's a key piece of the puzzle. As you said, the MRC's gone through a great effort to make sure the facility is protected and the equipment doesn't get destroyed. And Mike is really the one that has made that happen. And it has been an incredible effort. It really has been huge. But we're doing that because we know, we believe, we want to make sure this moves forward. We've done, and you said, people think we're doing nothing. And that's frustrating because there is a lot going on. Even before I was appointed to the board, seeing what was going on and talking with Kathy, we don't have a whole lot of leverage, but we're using every bit of leverage we have to keep this moving forward. You know, these are the things that makes the MRC board and the MRC members important, that we keep this moving forward. And sometimes it's a David and Goliath scenario. You know, you've got this little MRC board, this 115 communities up here in Maine where nobody really thinks about, you know, it's all just forests and trees up here. And we're trying to get Goliath to even notice us sometimes, these bondholders, and we're doing everything we can with the help of our, you know, whether it's lawyers or George, we're doing everything we can to put our shoulder to that wheel and push it forward, move it forward. And that's the value that the MRC brings to all its members, and will continue to do so. I just can't stress that enough. This is very, very important work, and it stretches way beyond what we do here. This, when it is successful, will be a model for communities across the US and maybe across the world. This will work, and it will be copied. And that's how important the work we're doing is. I guess that's it. I kind of got off a little bit of a soapbox.
Thanks, Aaron. Tony.
I'd like to pick up on what Aaron said. My name is Tony Smith. I'm Public Works Director for the town of Mount Desert. We signed on with one bin all in January 1st, 2020. We started with the one bin all in. No coastal fail. We hadn't been recycling since that time until this past Monday. My board of selectmen re-upped our local recycling program on an interim measure until coastal is sold and up and running. like Aaron said, coastal was up over 50%, which is the state law for every town to try to meet for recycling, 50%. That's why it's in the permits. The state planning office, when they were in existence, I had to complete annual reports on our waste management and recycling. They either got drawn in and were part of DEP, but I had to continue those reports. We used to recycle in town 12% of the garbage. And that included 0.5% for the bottle bill and percentages for construction, demolition debris, and bulky things like that. At Coastal, we were over 50%. We're paying close to $400 a ton now. $43,000 for 110 tons of recyclables over a 7-year average. That's pretty pricey. There's neighbor towns that are in that same ballpark. That's a lot of money. I'm looking forward to the sale of the facility and getting it up and running. And Mike was out with his family last weekend or 2 weekends ago to go to dinner somewhere. And the alarm went off at the facility. His wife, she said, shook her head, but that's where they went before dinner so that he could check out what that alarm is. He's running ragged 7 days a week. Yes, we pay him, but I've seen people paid a lot more, get a heck of a lot less out of it. That's for darn sure. You don't get into my business for the attaboys. I can take criticism, but the easiest thing in the world to do is to critique somebody else's work. Woulda, shoulda, coulda, sure. If we could go back 2 years ago, maybe we'd have done something different. But we all worked in the best interest of 115 members to get to where we are today, which isn't exactly where we want to be. But I can see light at the end of the tunnel, and I think we're going to get it done. If the bondholders had come through with the interim loan 2 years ago, what if? We could say what if all night. But I see light at the end of the tunnel. I think this plant does work. We just need to get it in the hands of the people that want to run it. And I don't mind profit whatsoever, as long as we're not paying all of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Tony. All right. Well, thank you all for those comments. I appreciate that. Looks something to think about. Before we open it up for questions, maybe you can put up the meeting schedule, and I'll just remind folks and let them know that our regular schedule is quarterly. And so these are the set meeting dates. I know, we all laugh.
Yeah.
What's a quarterly meeting? But we know for sure we'll be meeting on these dates next year, so put them in your calendar. We encourage folks to participate. We will be making sure all meetings are available remotely, accessible remotely. But our goal is to hold at least the quarterly ones in person as well for those that would like to attend, assuming COVID protocols don't prohibit it. And again, we're having a special meeting this Friday, so I'm sure there'll be some other meetings interspersed between the quarterly meetings, but I wanted to make sure folks knew what our regular schedule was for next year. But with that, we will open it up to comments and questions. I
Stop the screen share if we're done so that we can actually
see people. Yeah, sure. So we'll, if you're participating by Zoom, you can use the raise hand function to indicate that you'd like to speak. If you're on Facebook, you can put something in the comments section and we'll ask your question or read your comments.
Oh, sorry.
Great. And if anybody here wants to make a comment, other than board members, you need to go up and stand by the little sign there to get captured by the owl. Did we have anybody who's indicating they'd like to speak?
Well, we had Jackie Elliott ask a question during the presentation during the Q&A.
Okay.
She, I will promote her to a panelist so she can ask that question.
Great.
So Jackie, you are now a panelist and you can, there you are. Unmute yourself and ask your question.
Hi, Jackie.
Hi, thank you for inviting me and it's appreciated. I'm just wondering, what has been the process that the committee has gone through in order to establish the viability of the technology that is being put forth in the past and even future?
Well, I think either Mike and or George might be able to speak to the commercial operations process and designating that.
So I can speak to that, Karen.
Okay.
So Coastal, as part of their agreement with the MRC, was required to pass a performance test. And myself and George and an independent engineer was on site to conduct that test. And that test had to verify that they hit over the 51 state requirement, over the 50% diversion goal, but they also could process the amount of the MRC's waste, which averages 45 tons per hour of the MRC waste. So they went through all of those tests right before they hit commercial operations so that they could proceed and move on to commercial operations.
And Tony has another follow-up point to that.
I was there for the performance testing, but I saw the briquettes that the facility produced that had a buyer for it. I can't remember if I saw samples of the pulp that there was an interested buyer that was willing to buy that. So I've seen it in operation. I've seen the materials coming out. The conveyor system did stall one day when the loader put a moose hide in the hopper that fed the conveyor. It's not set up to take carcasses, but it does work. I've seen it in operation. I've seen it work. We also had in the evaluation, it seems like many years ago, the University of Maine Pulp and Paper Foundation reviewed the pulp process and gave it a stamp of approval. My big concern was, will it work in Maine, not knowing it was going to be inside. So yes, it does work. The biogas production, I'm responsible with a wonderful wastewater superintendent of 3 wastewater treatment plants. There is gas produced and it is saleable and it does burn. Like in the oil fields, you see the excess gas had a torch on the outside of the building to burn off the excess. So I've seen the results of the processing of the MSW.
Do you have current examples of where this technology is being successfully employed on the scale that you're seeking to do it? Are those operations going on somewhere in the country, in the world?
George?
Yeah, okay, George Aronson. Okay, first of all, there are, I think we're getting up to about 10 mixed waste processing facilities. The facility belongs to a class of facility which are called mixed waste processing. Okay, typically material will come in and it'll have a front end which will pull out the materials that might otherwise be pulled out at curbside or through source separation, but we'll do that automatically. And then the back end will have other products, in this case, cellulose pulp and the fines and the briquettes. If you look at around the country, there are other facilities, and we have monitored the status of those facilities in Montgomery, Alabama, Moncks Corner, South Carolina, Rochester, Massachusetts. There are a few in California, Athens, Sunnyvale. I'm forgetting 1 or 2 at this point. There's a new one in Utah as well. But so there is we're starting to see a fleet of facilities with the new approach. And again, they are generally of the class with the front end and the back end. They're each a little different because the technology is still emerging. The point is that, or the questions are, can you get material out of the front end that meets quality standards and can be sold? And in fact, what we saw during the performance test and subsequently is that the material out of the front end was recovered and was sold even in 2019 and early 2020, when the markets were a lot tougher than they are right now. And again, if you look back at a time when China closed its borders and they were scrambling to move materials, this facility could move its material at a time when other facilities could not. So I think the quality of the material that was recovered was quite encouraging. The back end, we also saw the pulp and the briquettes being made to a standard. There were some timing issues in terms of how that was done and some capacity issues, but the quality of the material was there. I think at this point, with the experience we have, we also know, what tweaks need to be made to make the facility more efficient and economic. But I think we're confident that those are improvements that can be made. And so I don't know if I've answered your question, but there are other facilities at least similar to it. And we have seen materials recovered of a quality that buyers would buy. And I think those are the underlying premises for our confidence.
So if I'm understanding you correctly, you're saying that there are facilities of the magnitude of the MRC operation that are actually functioning. We're not talking about laboratory settings for this technology.
No, in fact, if you go to some of the other facilities are larger. So that I know that Rochester, Massachusetts has 2 process lines as opposed to the 1. I think the one in Utah was a little bit larger as well. You tend to see 40 to 45 tons per hour as a standard size. Then the question is, how many shifts does it operate? How many days a week, 5 or 6? But they tend to be in around the same scale or even a little larger than what we have. So that I think we're comfortable that the issues aren't related to scale up at this point.
Thank you, and I apologize for the slashes in the chat function. My clipboard fell onto my keyboard.
We've all done it. We've all done it.
Thank you.
Thank you for your questions and for attending today.
So Ed Spencer has asked. And I think you might have to accept their.
So it's not working, the connection?
Yeah, he must not be like accepting the promotion to a panelist.
So we did submit written questions, so we can go over those.
Yep.
So these are questions from Ed Spencer. His first one was, what % of the MRC trash is now going to PERC? And could PERC handle more if the MRC were to commit to that option in the future? Mike?
So about 3/4 of our MSW, the MRC's MSW is going to PERC. One commitment that we did make is folks that are doing the all-in are sending to PERC. I can't speak on PERC's behalf, but I do feel that without a significant investment on PERC's part, MRC could not commit to any more tonnage for a long-term basis. The more waste that we provide create capacity issues, which creates additional bypass for PERC. So at this time, without a significant investment on PERC's part, I don't feel like we could provide them with any more waste or on a long-term basis.
Thank you, Mike. So he had a second set of questions. Given the uncertainty surrounding the future of the Hampton plant, why would it be a bad idea for towns to do more recycling? Likewise, why can't the MRC communities strive to reduce the amounts of organics in their trash via composting? It seems that each of these practices would reduce the tonnages involved with sending MSW to PERC or to landfill. And I guess I would just start to make the comment of, there's certainly no reason, it's not a bad idea, I suppose, for towns to do that if that's what they choose. Obviously, Mount Desert's doing something similar. I think though, practically speaking, a lot of communities don't have that flexibility or certainly the funds to be able to support that endeavor, which right now is in some cases prohibitively expensive. And then I also like to think about the user, the customer side of it, and the flip flop and the changing instructions, which is always a challenge in recycling to begin with. So, and in terms of composting, MRC has never discouraged composting. We're always supportive if people want to, have their folks encourage backyard composting and the like. We're supportive of that. The only thing that MRC has that's the prohibition is, large scale composting organics diversion project, creating your own, landfill composting operation, something like that. But I mean, I speak for myself, and, the sense of the board that we've had in the past is that MRC supports waste reduction initiatives. The flip side, of course, is that, waste is of the nature, especially a plant, a processing plant, they need a certain volume of trash to be able to operate efficiently. Our goal with the Hampton facility was to develop a facility of the size that we knew could handle this region's trash, and at the same time, handle waste reduction initiatives that we knew that everybody wanted to be undertaking, that the state's goals were set for and whatnot. So, it was kind of a balancing act, but we think the Hampton facility is sized appropriately because there's actually a lot more waste in this region that's not going to that plant. So there's still lots of opportunity in this region to reduce waste. I didn't know if you wanted to say anything about that, Mike?
Yeah, I mean, I agree 100%, but I think it's also important to remember that a lot of our members in rural areas and smaller communities, they eliminated their recycling programs at their transfer stations due to when the markets crashed and the volatility, and also with the COVID. And at that point, they didn't reopen them, or a lot of them were going through the phases where they weren't accepting this type of plastic anymore, or they weren't accepting this. They weren't fully 100% bringing in recyclables, whether it be the plastic or the paper or the e-waste, depending on where the market was. So we've always supported that. The one thing we've got to remember about this plant is a lot of recycles are considered commodities and are baled. The cardboard's pulled to make another piece of cardboard, the bottle's pulled to make another bottle. The one exciting thing, and when I came aboard seeing this plant operate, is you go to any recycling center and it's full of dumpsters out back for roll-offs, and that's for all the contaminated products. That's for all that soiled cardboard or that improper plastic that has no value. And the one thing, or film, and the one thing with Coastal is they made that into a product. They cherry picked their products, so they were making the baled commodities. They were doing the plastics, the numbered plastics. They were doing the cardboard that was being, reproduced in cardboard, but also that soiled tissue or that contaminated was getting made into a pulp, or that film was getting made into a briquette. And that's how they hit such the high diversions. So when MRC did this, they encouraged, for their towns to continue recycling and recycling. They just went one better and made sure that a lot of those products that weren't getting recycling with choosing this plant were going to get recycled.
So, we get questions often about, like it's we get questions about MRC somehow limiting recycling. And the fact of the matter is, every single community gets to make its own choice, whereas some chose to go all in. My community is paying $135 a ton to continue to source, separate, and move the recycling forward. And I get that it would be great if we could do more. And I'm reminded, I have a town councilor who is constantly in my ear about doing better, reducing what comes in. And, you know, when George, and I think George is the only one still on the board or near the board to talk about what we were thinking about when we went in this direction to begin with. And we wanted a plant that didn't need a ton of waste in order to be able to work. We wanted a plant that could be scalable so that our communities were not held hostage to a guaranteed annual tonnage. That we, in our effort to have a plant at PERC that would accept the waste, created a monster. That's what we called it, the monster. That was truly a disincentive to diverting material from the waste stream, which should always be our first choice, to recycling, to reusing, to being creative. I mean, my counselor wants me to buy a machine that will melt plastics, 3 through 7 plastics, so we can make benches and cool things like that. And this opportunity, when we get it up and running, I'm going to be like Bob and say when we get it up and running, will allow communities to do that. And I think it would be great if we could do it all right now. But at this moment in time, we have one Mike, one George, one Karen, who are doing a ton of work to try to get this plant up and running so that we're not cycling through and filling the landfill. My first desire in all of this is the number one, keep as much trash out of the landfill as we can. Our opportunities are limited. And I get that people want us to do more, but I think that there is a misconception out there that MRC is somehow telling communities that they can't do things right now. People want a backyard compost, great. Organizations want to get together and encourage backyard composting, great. Municipalities who are members simply can't do it. You can support it, but you can't run it. And you know what? We all knew that when we signed the joinder agreement. And the reason that that's important is when the plant is going, it is those organics that create the value-added product that supports the plant long-term. So I get that people have questions. I also get that MRC is all about the plant right now. It's what it looks like to the outside world. Our goals have not changed. We are here to create a variety of solutions for our members. This one right now is just the most important one because we're trying to keep our waste out of the landfill. And I said I wasn't going to speak.
Tony?
Sophie, I just want to clarify something. Member towns can backyard compost.
Yes.
They just can't have a centralized
Yes.
compost pile. But I'd like to go back. PERC had birthing pains, severe. Then all of a sudden they became really successful and they were good for the MRC towns. A couple of reasons PERC became very successful was the power company was obligated to pay them a premium for the electricity that they generated. Plus the MRC, because of the changes made in the early 90s, I believe, George, you can correct me when this took place, owned a little over 24% of the plant. So we had a seat at that table to work. We had to agree to increases in tipping fees if there were any, other operational changes. But we had a seat at that table as an owner, and that made a big difference back then. And to date, the bondholders own Coastal Resources of Maine, not the MRC. But like someone said, we're trying very, very hard to get this plant up and running. Sold.
Just to clarify, they don't own it. They have first call on it, right, George? As Jonathan tries to keep us on the straight and narrow.
For, yeah, it's, yeah.
I think we get Ed.
Oh, okay, great.
Ed, I think you can unmute yourself now.
Hello, can you hear me?
Hi, Ed, yes.
Okay, for starters, I want to say I appreciate your efforts, and I hope what I'm going to say isn't taken as criticism, but I feel there's a few things I need to point out. And let's start with, I'm hearing that the UMaine engineers gave it a stamp of approval and that the plant works. Well, I was there when the two guys from UMaine Engineering gave their report to the MRC, and they explicitly did not say that they endorsed it. What they were saying was that the concept was theoretically possible. And the MRC leadership at that time, which is different than what it is now, was kind of pressuring them to come out and say, hey, this is going to work, everything's going to be good. And they kept backpedaling away and did not say anything like that. So that's one thing. And I think maybe you could contact the people who were involved there on that. And the other thing, as far as when the plant did its trial run, what the DEP was looking for, which you technically met, was a 50% recycling rate. However, as I recall, and I don't have the specific percentages in front of me right here, although I'm sure we can get them, is there was a sizable percentage of that 50+% that was to be used as daily cover. Well, in the DEP's definition of recycling, daily cover at the landfill counts as recycling. However, it's not the same thing as diversion. And this plant was pitched to the member communities as going to achieve an 80% landfill diversion rate. So I'm saying it didn't really divert 50% because part of that 50% was going to be used as daily cover. And so I'm not sure that this is going to work for another, if another buyer comes forward. I would hope that it could, but I'm just not positive about it, and I'm concerned that we may be getting into a place where we're, in a way, misrepresenting what the plant did and what the situation really is and really was, and especially with the UMaine people, I'd be very careful about that. Other than that, it would be wonderful if it worked. I hope it does someday, and in the meantime, it's my understanding that about 2/3 of your waste is going to PERC. So I think as far as working with them in the future, I think keep open lines of communication there. I know there were conflicts before between the MRC and the PERC plant owners, but I think there's only one owner there now. So I hope you're in communication with that owner and the people down there too, and we can all work to just keep this stuff out of the landfills. That's my number one concern. So thanks for listening to me. Happy holidays, and people certainly deserve a good rest at some point. Thank you.
Thank you, Ed. Mike?
Yes. So, and if Ed's still there, Karen, I just would like to address the daily cover and just make sure that we clear that up. So what was going as daily cover was the fines in the pulp. And what was happening is at that time, we didn't have our beneficial use permit. And so they had to dispose of that at the same cost as MSW, which was very expensive. So DEP came in, because the MRC got involved and noticed this. DEP came in and they approved it as temporarily daily cover, which was a lesser rate a ton. It was almost less than half to dispose of. So they approved the pulp and the fines as a daily cover until the beneficial use permit came in, because they were producing all this pulp and they were producing all these fines, but they had no place to get rid of them without the beneficial use permit. They couldn't sell them and it couldn't be counted towards the recycle. So that's what was going as the daily cover at the time, because they did not have the permit to sell those products.
Right. So
We now have secured that permit.
So, and the other thing that I would like to just really ask is really, what's the alternative? And just maybe even George might speak to this, remind us of why we didn't go with PERC and how that really hasn't changed. MRC, honestly, we're looking to move forward. We're not looking to move back. And we're looking for a solution that will last us decades into the future. And, you know, as much as we love our partners at PERC, and we had a very successful relationship and partnership, that facility is extremely aging and has many, many issues associated with it. I don't think it's the future for MRC.
I would say that, first and foremost, we're working currently with PERC, that we wouldn't be able to serve our members without PERC's efforts right now. And number two, I am but one voice on this board, but I happen to believe that the future that would work best for our region is one that MRC and PERC are working together to address the total waste stream, because there are some streams that are better suited to go through PERC. There are some items that are better suited to go through the Hampton plant once we get it up and going. I realized there was a time when it wasn't us and them. We're beyond that. And quite honestly, I think we both need each other to move forward. And I hope that we can get our plant up and going so that we can really work with the PERC partnership to try to find that global long-term solution for the entire waste stream.
Thank you, Stephanie. That's very well stated.
There was one other,
Sorry.
Excuse me.
Sorry.
Bill
What was that,
Lippincott, he had emailed me, so I wanted to promote him as a panelist. He has a statement that he wants to be read.
Okay, we'll do that in a minute.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just want to go, Ed Spencer, thank you for correcting my recollection of what the Humane Hope Paper Foundation published. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, and I really like that last comment there, and I think that's a way to think, how you can be working with PERC to do the best job at landfill diversion possible. Thanks, Mike.
Thank you, Ed.
So who is this with us, Jesse?
It should be Bill Lippincott. You are voted as a panelist, so if you turn on your video or unmute yourself. Read your statement.
Thank you. So I'm the chair of Don't Waste Maine, which is a coalition of people across the state advocating for responsible policies that protect the health of communities most at risk from the negative impacts of landfill incinerator operations, and we advocate for sustainable ways to deal with our discarded resources. I think our group and many other environmental groups would support the MRC if you were to go to a different model that is community-owned, like EcoMaine, with source separation before materials get mixed in with MSW, including the separation of food waste and the biodigestion of food waste, and that this plant could be repurposed to do that. I think this would be a great use for state infrastructure funds. because it affects 115 towns that are in crisis as far as dealing with waste. There's a great urgency and need for infrastructure funding for this purpose, and I think a lot of environmental groups would get behind that. But if you're to continue with the current fiber right model, which requires towns to send all their food waste with their MSW, which and also disincentivizing the separation of recyclable material with a focus on turning plastics into fuel, we can't support that. I did have a couple of questions just from the discussion. I know that Coastal Resources got permits for their briquettes and their fuel, but did they ever get a permit for the biogas before the plant closed?
Did we get a permit for biogas? George, do you know?
Well, I mean, it depends on what you mean by a permit, because the plant itself would not be, let me take a step back. What you saw at the Hamden facility was essentially a three-phase progression in which the first phase involved the things we second. There was going to be a second phase in which they would add capability to make biogas and inject it into the pipeline. So the second phase was not completed. And so to the extent that, and I like that there's a beneficial use license for injecting biogas into a pipeline. So I don't know that that's relevant here. They did have an air emissions license and they did get that in phase one. But they did not proceed with the intended phase two, which would be injecting gas into the pipeline. So I don't know if that answers your question, but it does give you a little better sense of where or what was permitted and what not permitted.
So was that process not fully operational? Is that why they didn't get the permit, or?
No. The biogas into the pipeline process was going to be a phase two of the process, and that they hadn't gotten to that point when they shut down.
Okay. You mentioned that there are 10 other plants around the country that are doing similar mixed waste process. What's the longest any of these plants has been in operation, and are they financially successful, any of them?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I don't see internal financials, so I can't make any representations on that. I'm sure you'll understand that. But well, there have been a number, I believe, of 2015, 2016 is the last generation of facilities. So we're seeing 5-6 years. I don't know when Moncks Corner went into commercial operation. I know Ensorga was starting up in the teens in West Virginia, and some of the ones in California have been around for that time as well. So it's not months, it's years. It's also not 20 years. So it's been him. But we're also looking at technology with more experience in Europe than here. So I guess I would call it a mid-range horizon. It's more than months, it's in the years range, but you're right, it's not a 20 or 30 year history either. I think the other thing that we've seen is that the technology has evolved quite a bit and continues to evolve. I don't know if you follow these things, you may well, but you're now seeing upgrades of equipment to incorporate machine learning and sorting and robotic systems as well, which is a capability that I know that Fiberite was looking at in Hamden. It might be incorporated in certain places, so that the technology itself is not stagnant and continues to improve. And we've also seen markets improve in the last few years. So I think it's fair to say that if their coastal facility is reopened today, would face a better market environment than it faced 2 years ago when we were in the immediate aftermath of the China blockade and markets were at their low point in the last few years. So I think, again, I don't know if I'm answering your question, I'm trying to, which is that there are some factors that continue to move, technology and markets are among them. And that if the Hamden plant is going to reopen, it's going to be taking advantage of the improvements in technology and the improved markets that we've seen over the last year.
Great. I think that's exciting that the technology is improving as far as robotics, et cetera. Another question, if towns wanted to divert food waste from, say, their school cafeterias, are they allowed to do that?
Like if they were sending it to, putting it in a compost pile in the back of the school, that would be fine.
What if they were to send it, say, Exeter Agri Energy rather than to you, the food waste?
I think if they wanted to contract to have that taken care of, they could have, as long as it's not a town-wide initiative effort to do that. If it was it's an individual entity essentially, is what they're making individual decision about that school.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Bill.
Thank you, Bill.
Appreciate your participation.
There's just one question, George, I think you were going back and forth with Lincoln. That town websites that they have curbside pickup that you can probably answer. The Q&A, but I didn't see anything on Facebook, and that was it for email. The other questions.
All right, so is that, we're done with questions then?
We're done with questions.
Okay.
George, you just might want to answer that one that's in the Q&A.
Jack's, I figure Jack came all the way from.
You have to make a speech.
No, I wouldn't do that.
Other than just to say, you guys have all done a tremendous job for many years now. I just want to thank you personally for all that you put in, continue to put in, and I agree with whoever said there is a light at the end of the tunnel.
Thank you. Appreciate hearing that.
Thank you.
So with that, I believe we have come to the conclusion of the annual meeting, and thank you all very much for participating today. We look forward to perhaps next year being able to reconvene and have this in an in-person event primarily. So thank you all very much, and have a very happy holiday season and an excellent new year, and we'll see you all in 2022.
Thank you. Thank you, Karen.
Thank you. It's a wrap.
So